Now, one of the issues that's dogged you is that of your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Do you regret the relationship that you maintained with him against Melinda's advice and wishes?
Oh, I've said that you're going way back in time, but yeah,
new audience.
I will say for the, over 100th time, yeah, I shouldn't have had dinners with him.
Epstein had a way of sexually compromising people. Is that what Melinda was warning you about?
No. I mean, no, I had dinner with him, and that's all.
And that you regret the relationship, the acquaintance?
That I had dinner with him.
Mm. And the relationship between the foundation and Epstein, which
there never was any relationship of any kind.
That was Microsoft billionaire Bill Gates being grilled over his relationship with convicted sex offender and disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein by Australian reporter Sarah Ferguson from ABC 730.
In 2019, the New York Times reported that Gates began his friendship with Epstein after Epstein was convicted of sex crimes, and that his former wife, Melinda Gates, warned her then husband about this relationship. So, Robbie, I just want to read you a paragraph from this New York Times expose because it a little bit complicates Epstein's own recollection of his relationship. So the Times reports that beginning in 2011, Mr. Gates met with Mr. Epstein on numerous occasions, including at least 3 times at Mr. Epstein's palatial Manhattan townhouse, and at least once staying late into the night, according to interviews with more than a dozen people familiar with the relationship, as well as documents reviewed by the New York Times. So, maybe a little bit more involved than Bill Gates wants to admit now. I thought that interview was great, and kudos to the reporter for pressing him on this. We make a lot of fun of QAnon for being this conspiracy theory, or Pizzagate, right? All of these conspiracy theories about how, there are these, this group of pedophiles who are, situated high up, billionaires and politicians, and that they're sort of secretly undermining America and engaged in this, widespread pedophilia. Like, obviously that's not true, and that's a conspiracy theory. But, when you have a situation where Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein are getting together for dinners that go late into the night, right, and then everything comes out that we know about Jeffrey Epstein, and Bill Gates acts so put upon for having to respond to questions like that, you can see why people are drawn to these conspiracy theories in a way, if that makes sense.
Right, especially given that the pivotal fact being here that this is all after the initial conviction for sexual abuse of a minor. Thank you for reading that from the New York Times story. This is in the New York Times story from 2019. Gates emailed a colleague in 2011 saying about Epstein, his lifestyle is very different and kind of intriguing, although it would not work for me. A spokesperson for Gates says he was referring only to the unique decor of the Epstein residences. Why wouldn't you, even if that is what you mean, wouldn't you not want to write an email expressing sympathy for the lifestyle of someone who had been convicted of underage sexual misconduct? Again, if this was all before the initial charges, and Gates said, "Look, I met with a lot of people. This was someone who said who was very wealthy, wanted to talk about doing some charitable efforts, and then when I found out he was a creep, we had no more contact." I think that would be a totally defensible thing to say. But again, this is after he was charged the first time in 2008. He was convicted in 2008 of procuring a child for prostitution, and then he got that infamously very light, ankle monitor sort of situation, and then continued to meet with rich and powerful people, including Bill Gates. So that's going to make people conspiracy minded at that point, because that's kind of nuts.
Right. And here's my thing is, it would be one thing if our, elites and billionaire class were like, look, we're libertines, we're going to try to break the law as much as we want. We're going to try to, do whatever we can, we're going to, see if you can catch us. Right. But they're not. They sit there, spewing these pieties about how they should be entrusted with, everything from how farming works, Bill Gates buying up, millions and millions of acres of farmland, to set the record, on climate, on this, on that. They always present themselves as being these paragons of virtue, right? When behind closed doors, you see that it's a very different situation. Now, Gates was also asked about the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic, to which he responded, quote, "The evidence is very clear that COVID-19 is naturally caused. It is a bad virus. We're going to have natural epidemics. And sadly, we may have some natural epidemics in the future," which of course will be good for his bottom line. Robbie, what do you make of this tweet?
Brianna and I were listening to an interview with him that we talked about last week, where it sounds like, where he actually criticizes the vaccines, or talks about how they're not good enough in a couple different ways, that the protection is not very durable, it doesn't last very long, you have to keep getting updates to it, it doesn't match with it doesn't make much difference for the newer variants, all those issues that everyone has been saying about the vaccines for forever, that it doesn't do enough about cases at all. It's really only severe disease and death, something people have been saying since the very start. And it tracks with it. He massively invested in BioNTech, the company that manufactures the vaccines, for Pfizer, and then sold a lot of those shares, and is now like, oh yeah, vaccines. Vaccines aren't the thing. He talked about a spray, you could get sprayed with something, taking the spray orally, and that would prevent you from getting COVID. How nice that would be, or getting a disease. Wouldn't that be great? I guess he's going to invest in that. It's just, it's interesting.
I think the problem here is the privatization of the public good. And you may not agree with me about this, Robbie, but, it would be fine if he was just a billionaire who invested in this and that, and kept his opinions to himself, right? And had no influence beyond just, I'm going to be making my profit where I can see it. The problem is when you have that billionaire-dom, where you become a plutocrat, right? Where your money turns into influence, and that influence turns into dictatorship when the government starts to enforce things like a vaccine mandate, right? That's the problem here. It's not that somebody has amassed a lot of wealth by being good at their job. That's totally fine. Capitalism is extremely important to, to all progress, right? To getting rid of poverty. There's only one thing that's worked throughout history, world history, global history, the history of the universe, and that's capitalism. The ability to accumulate wealth based on your labor is extremely important. The problem comes when that wealth turns into power and influence and replaces the public good, replaces the public voice, replaces, democracy. And I think that really came out so strongly with COVID and the COVID response. And then, of course, people like Bill Gates and their relationship with the vaccines.
I think I do agree with you. I wouldn't call that, you said, the privatization of the social good. I think I would describe that as the opposite. I would say that's the socialization of the private incentive, of the profit incentive. It is fine if private companies are, investing their resources to make profits, and then what usually takes place because of that, the profit incentive being this enormous motivator to, in a lot of cases at least, create some social good, to more food or more stuff that makes our lives better off. But then when those people can also control the mandatory part of public of policy, of say, well, we can get our things required or our rival products banned. We can force at gunpoint policies to be adopted because the government has all the force and the power. Then you get bad incentives whereby in the private sector they're checked by rival firms or by various things, or also by government regulation. They're not checked. They're the ones doing the checking. They keep everyone else in check, and you get very bad incentives, and you get, just like you said, a lot of the COVID policy we've had, where it's not just we invented a vaccine, we think this is going to protect you against severe disease and death. Get it if you want. It's your choice. Ask your doctor. They're going to tell you if you're in a risk category, you probably should get it, etc. That's all fine. Then it moves away from that to, well, we're going to also add it to the list of things that are protected from liability and are probably going to be required for schools in various municipalities. And and we're going to approve just ours and not other ones, and we're going to centralize testing and that whole thing, which is where we went so awry over the course of the pandemic.
Could not agree with you more, Robbie.
Well, we'll have more Rising right after this. Stay tuned.